The heart I hid became my cage. The disappearing smile. There's a saying that the eyes never lie, but hearts can become the greatest liars of all. This is the story of me, Sarah Stephen. A woman whose smile could light up any room, until it didn't. At first, no one noticed when the brightness began to fade. My friends chalked it up to stress, my coworkers to fatigue. But deep down, I knew something was shifting, something dangerous. You see, I was a master at emotional concealment. From childhood, I learned that my feelings were not safe to show. When my parents argued, I'd hide in my room, pressing a pillow to my face to muffle my sobs. I carried that skill into adulthood, learning to present a perfectly curated version of myself to the world, confident, agreeable, unshakable. But there's a psychological cost to hiding your heart. It creates a double life. The one others see, and the one you live inside your head. Over time, the gap between the two becomes unbearable. My first warning sign came one rainy evening. I was standing in my kitchen, tea in my hand, when I suddenly realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt genuine joy. Not the polite, socially acceptable kind, but the kind that bubbles up uninvited. Instead, there was only emptiness. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, and while it can protect you in the short term, it slowly builds an internal prison. The emotions don't disappear. They collect like stagnant water, poisoning the soul from within. I thought I was protecting myself by hiding my heart, but not knowing that I was building the bars of my own cage. The human brain is an incredible survival machine. It learns how to adapt, how to read danger, how to build armor. My armor was my mask, the carefully constructed smile, the polite "I'm fine," the willingness to help others even when I was running on fumes. I became indispensable at work, the go-to person in every crisis. But the problem with being the one everyone relied on is that no one stops to ask how you're doing. One day, my manager praised me in front of the team, calling me the backbone of the department. I smiled. Everyone clapped. And inside, I felt nothing. This emotional numbness is another symptom psychologists warn about. When you wear a mask too long, you can lose sight of the person underneath. Your true self starts to wither from lack of air. My cage grew tighter because I avoided vulnerability. Vulnerability meant risk. Risk meant rejection. And rejection was something I had sworn never to feel again. But the cost of that vow, I hadn't let anyone see the real me in years. That night, lying in bed, I scrolled through my phone, endless images of friends traveling, falling in love, celebrating life milestones. I knew it wasn't the full truth, but I still felt the sting. Comparison is the thief of joy, but isolation is the thief of identity. And I was both comparing and isolating myself. Cracks in the walls. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. I was giving a presentation at work when I forgot my next line. My mind went blank. I gripped the podium, heart pounding. For the first time in years, my mask slipped just for a moment. A colleague noticed and asked quietly afterward, "Are you okay?" I almost said no, I almost let the truth out. But the mask was too familiar. "Yeah, I'm fine," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my heart. But cracks were forming. And cracks, once they appear, will spread. Later that week, I visited my younger sister, Grace. Over coffee, Grace said something I hadn't heard in years. "You've changed. You don't laugh the way you used to." It was such a simple observation, yet it hit like a hammer. When someone who knows your history points out your absence, it's harder to hide. Psychologists describe this moment as the mirror effect. Sometimes, it takes another person reflecting our reality back at us for us to notice the truth. I went home that night and stared at my reflection. My eyes looked tired. Not from lack of sleep, but from lack of living. I realized that I had been in survival mode for so long, I didn't know how to live any other way. When the cage locks. There's a dangerous thing about emotional cages. Sometimes you forget the door was ever opened. My world began to shrink. Invitations to social gatherings felt exhausting. Phone calls went unanswered. Even basic self-care became a burden. This is what psychologists call emotional burnout, where mental exhaustion manifests as physical fatigue. One morning, I overslept, I missed a meeting, and spent the entire day berating myself. The critic in my head was relentless. "You're failing. You're falling apart. And no one can ever know. That was the cruel irony. The more I tried to hide my struggle, the more isolated I became. My turning point came later one night. I sat at my desk, the only light coming from my laptop screen. I was typing an email when I suddenly stopped, my fingers frozen over the keys. The thought came, uninvited and chilling. If I vanished tomorrow, would anyone notice? The question terrified me. It was the first time I realized that my cage wasn't just emotional, it was becoming dangerous. Learning to unlock the door. The truth about emotional cages is this. You're the only one who can find the key. But you don't have to unlock it alone. My first step was the smallest but also the hardest. I told Grace, my sister, the truth. Not all of it, not at once, but enough. Enough for someone to see my heart, bruised and trembling. To my surprise, Grace did judge. She listened. She hugged me. She reminded me that the people who truly love us don't need us to be perfect. They need us to be real. From there, I began therapy. I learned about emotional suppression, about the way my childhood shaped my patterns. I practiced vulnerability in small doses, letting a friend to see me crying, admitting when I was tired, saying no without guilt. It wasn't an overnight transformation. Healing rarely is. But over time, the air in my cage began to change. The bars seemed thinner. Light slipped through. The moral lesson. Hiding your heart might protect you from pain, but it also locks away your joy, your love, your life. The walls you build for safety can become your prison. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone in.